Hey guys, welcome to episode 16 of Biomassed. We really appreciate you downloading us on iTunes or pulling us up on YouTube or from the biomass.net website. Again, we're not live streaming tonight, which is probably very obvious to most of you in the audience right now. But we did want to kind of keep it to a little bit more narrow discussion than what we normally have. So basically, we've squared off with two CPM1 members and two CPM1 non-members, and we can kind of go at it gladiator style on a couple different things. So this should be kind of fun. But seriously, we've got a fairly tight discussion for you tonight. We do want to finish up what we talked about with Hotfix Charlie from last week. And now that Hotfix Charlie is dropped, we can have a little bit of a discussion on, sort of everybody's general impressions. And I, for one, I actually think it's working out pretty well. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it and we'll do quick intros from everybody. Pokey.
I'm Pokey Draven, CEO of OSG Planetary Operations and co-host here on Biomassed.
SMB.
Yep, SirManBoy here, CPM1 member and director of Molon Labe.
Nice, Rizel.
It's Rizel, and if you don't know who I am, check the last episode because I say it every time.
Trolling already. And I'm Jason Larison, one of the co-hosts here on Biomassed, member of OSG Planetary Operations in game, and still messing around looking for Corp and Eve. Actually, haven't really been able to touch either one of the games as much as I've wanted to recently, but I have had enough to know that I do like Hotfix Charlie, and we'll be talking about that shortly. Oh hell no! Wouldn't do that if you paid me.
Give them your 500 million ISK as the entry fee; they'll take you.
Yeah, let me get right on that. So the first thing I'd like to do is kind of turn it over to Sarai and SirManBoy and talk a little bit about maybe CPM1 update, just general things that they've been working on, and it looks like they're starting to set up some structure on how the community can have some pretty open access to them. So I'll turn that over to you guys for an update.
Well, the big thing we did was right after last episode, we started a blog. And it's not going to have a lot of actual, there's not commenting on it. It's going to be, but all 7 members can post to it, and we'll be posting things that we're doing and posts of relative importance that we have out and about around the internet.
That's cool. So will that be one of your kind of primary mechanisms that you want people to give you feedback, or is that more just where you can update the community members?
We're going to be mostly pointing people to the forums and such for comments, but it's a good way to actually find where the important threads and things that we're doing are. So Judge will probably post his videos up there, and you can go to YouTube to comment on them. A lot of forum threads will get copied there, and that'll be an easy way to find the most important topics that we're discussing and collecting feedback on.
That's cool. So it's you see it being more of a collaborative blog, or is each council member going to have kind of, hey, this is Sarai's corner over here, and this is the judge's chambers, or whatever cool thing we could put up for SirManBoy that won't get him arrested.
Ooh, that was nasty. But SirManBoy's white panel van. I think that would be the one to go with there, but
Wrong.
I'm sorry it was there.
It's been a busy day. Sorry.
Right now, it's just all 7 members have posting rights to it. You can see on the posts who posted it, and everyone's kind of free to contribute their own bits to it. I'm sure, of course, if we have any sort of joint CPM statements, they would be posted there as well.
Okay, cool. Hey, Pokey, I got a question for you. Since we're the two non-council dudes in the room, what are the things as a player you would like to see, from the CPM in terms of communication? Where do you think that our newly minted council bros can help out with in terms of communication and accessibility?
Well, in terms of just talking to people, they need to kind of perhaps post up kind of the threads that they're talking in. I mean, I've seen Cross and SirManBoy got some posts up in the feedback and whatnot. That's really good. I was able to link some people to those threads that were complaining about lack of communication. So I'd like to see more of that, where they're actually actively saying, "Hey, I want your feedback on this." What are your thoughts? Actually have an actual thread rather than just commenting on an existing thread. I think that certainly shows the player you're actively gathering information rather than just responding to other stuff that's on the forums.
See, but I like takeover threads instead of creating my own. Like there was a thread that it was complaining about people whining about the new sniper crosshair, and I basically like, okay, so here's the format I want feedback in. Can you all answer this? And so I've got like 2 pages of feedback there over there, and that's I didn't create the thread. I just kind of commandeered it. But and my other problem is I like to troll other threads, so
Well, I think it goes a lot more when you're the one actually making the thread and actively saying, "Hey, I want feedback," rather than responding to someone else giving feedback. I mean, that's just my perspective. I see it as more of a proper communication if you're the one opening that thread of communication rather than just hopping in there and commandeering it, so to speak. But that, again, that's just my personal view on it.
I think something that surprises me, and it's really no secret. I think all of us who have been playing for a while realize what the forums are like and how they've sort of come, or I should say, how they've degenerated a little bit over time. I mean, one of the things that's frustrating for me, and it's not going to curtail me from communicating on the forums because I like that interaction with the player base, but it's funny. Just a couple of examples, just 2 threads that I've been involved in recently. That one that was more something that I wanted to talk about and put out there, and then another thread was one of my CPM cohorts wanted to put up there, and I got involved in it too. And it's really interesting to see how bitter some of the postings get. Just when you're trying to like put a conversation out there and get people's insight, how a lot of people will just jump on a thread to essentially complain or again try to reiterate their feeling that the game is somehow dead. I just don't understand that attitude, and it doesn't really seem very productive to me.
Well, my pet peeve that I will sit on is the people who aren't playing the game and haven't been playing the game in months and have no intention to come back and play the game, but still participate on the forums just to harass people.
Yep.
I understand it's a free-to-play game. Unfortunately, we can't tell them because they're not playing. They can't be on the forums, though I kind of wish we could. Because I mean, it's just the most negative voices on the forums. They're not participating. They're just there to harass players. And the big thing is not to let people take what they say too seriously.
Yeah. I think maybe even equally frustrating, and this is something that I'm much more sympathetic to, because I think we all wanted Dust to just become the greatest thing since sliced bread, and to some of us it's still an amazing game, and I love it dearly. But sometimes you'll talk about some issues, and you're trying to get the community to latch onto this idea. Hey, let's reach for the cookie jar; it's within reach. But then you'll have people jump on a thread, and they're reaching for the moon. Like, they don't understand the technical limitations, and it can often divert the nature of the conversation in directions that aren't very helpful. So that's something else that I'm noticing too.
Well, I think you guys need to point that out then and say, well, that's a good idea. We wish we could do that, but we can't for X reasons.
Well, I'm just, it kind of strikes me because I've seen what you're talking about too, SMB, where, and some guys with the best of intentions will post up in like the feedback section of the forums, and they're looking for certain, they want certain things, which are they're generally newer players that are probably aware broadly of the situation going on with the Dust, but perhaps not the history, of the last almost 2 years. And it makes me, it strikes me that might not be a bad thing as an opening gambit for the CPM, is when you guys actually make a couple, like 1 or 2 of your first like official, Uber post kind of thing is, what exactly do you think you can do in terms of Dust, or like where are the range fans? Because I think that's one of the things that would help focus the players. Particularly the newer ones that still are pretty excited about contributing in a positive way to sustaining Dust and perhaps carrying it over into Legion.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess it is kind of hard to see it from a different perspective when you've been someone who's kept up with the news on Dust for so long, and you definitely got your finger on the pulse of where the game is. It doesn't occur to someone like me maybe all the time that there's out there who are playing Dust and they enjoy it, and they might be realize exactly what state the game is skew.
You're cutting in and out, just so you're aware.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I'm not loud enough. No, I'm just saying that, as someone who's played the game for so long and who has kept up with the news and understands, exactly where Dust is at this point in time, sometimes it's maybe a little bit hard to realize the perspective of someone who is new and who isn't as aware of, the current state of the game and what the technical limitations are in terms of development. And I think I see that on the forums. When you see guys come up with these ideas that clearly, if they've been paying attention, are not things that CCP would pursue for development, just because there's no way they could be done in a hotfix. They're just so far out of reach, pie in the sky type ideas, and maybe some players just don't get that. Maybe they're not aware, exactly where the state of the game is. But for people like me and Soraya and you guys, the rest of you guys, we've been keeping up with pretty much all the news that the developers have been throwing out there, so we kind of get it, even though some other players maybe don't quite understand it yet.
No, I think that's a pretty fair way of looking at it. But like I said, I think you guys are in a good position that you're thinking about how to organize communication to the to the player base, and in retrospect, everybody kind of understands the situation. But I remember for a long time that was a huge beef. That was a big point of contention with CPM 0 was basically. Everybody was on radio silence for a long time. Now, again, post FanFest, I think we understand, why a lot of that occurred. But I think that's one of the things that you guys are going to face is, for better or for worse, like it's just human nature. But you're going to be viewed initially in the same light that people dealt with CPM 0. So I think how you guys structure your communications and how you you attack that very specific problem in terms of building kind of community interaction links. That kind of stuff is going to be huge for you guys in the first few months. So, and I'm really looking forward to watching how you do it and seeing the means that you want to push for things and kind of where the personality of the CPM takes. Starts to coalesce around some different issues or different things. So, as a player, the one thing I would say is, even if you don't have anything to say, like anything new, at least continue to be engaged, because like I said, unfortunately for a long time, I think people thought Iron Wolf was the only CPM that was still active for like a 3 or 4 month stretch. So as long as you're as a group collectively engaged, I think that'll be a good thing for all of you.
Yeah. And go ahead. Sorry.
And I think a lot of us are forum posters, heavy forum posters. So I think you should see a pretty decent amount of that. But when threads occur, we're actually just as excited when CCP posts as everyone else. Because there are of course topics we can't talk about, and there's this moment where someone at CCP posts something like, yes, we can talk to people, and that's actually, we're actually really, really interested in engaging the players and getting that information to the players as fast as we can. And that a big part of that comes down to convincing CCP that they need to bring that stuff to the players as quick as they can. But that's an ongoing process.
Well, let me, I'll kind of diverge a little bit before we kind of get into the guts of, sort of the in-game stuff. A question about CCP communication to the players. I think this would probably be a good point. Like what your guys' view on this is a lot of people, I think they continue to conflate this CSM or CPM with CCP, and they're two obviously very different structures. Like you don't get a paycheck, as interesting as that would be if you actually got one, but the reality is you're a player driven group. You're a player formed and voted on group that sort of helps focus CCP's look at things from a player and community perspective, and you can provide some technical expertise here and there.
Mitani refers to it as unpaid volunteer consulting work.
Yeah, that's basically exactly what it is. There's certainly nothing crazy about that. Um, I'm one of the things, and I've talked to a couple of different people about it. I know I mentioned it across, but I think what is frustrating to players is that they see a lot of other games that are roughly in the same development stage as Dust, sort of the pre-alpha, alpha stage, basically, give or
Wait, we
take.
released this game. It's
Yeah, well,
done.
no, I'm for Legion, by the way, but although
I'm
you,
just messing with you.
that's true, but I think that's one of the things that people understand what Dust is now. I think their biggest questions really revolve around Legion. Um, and they look at other games that are similar genre, similar player-based draw, like the people that you'd be gunning for to pull them in. The level of communication between some other studios and folks is just honestly it's just noticeably different. And that's one of the things that I'm curious if you guys could comment on is how, where do you think the communication level, specifically about Legion, is with the player base, and what would you like to see them do?
I would like to see massively more communication than we get, and I think it's a corporate cultural thing.
Yeah, I concur. I'd like to see a lot more from them as well. Just, I mean, even if it was just something small, but it came in, regular occurrences. The fact that we're not hearing much of anything in terms of, giving us anything at all over long periods of time, I think is very problematic. But, I guess that, like Sarai says, it might be a corporate culture thing, and, who knows?
I mean, are they worried about something? Is there something that's freaking them out and making them hesitant to talk about it? I mean, like, you guys know more than we do, obviously.
We really don't know all that much right now. We're dealing with early administrative stuff and Dust stuff. We're really actually most of our work so far has been pertaining to Dust. But I mean, like, the big thing for me is I see it as an issue where they need to keep excitement going for a significant amount of time. So, I think that they should have something, rather than, we had a couple really big threads, that they came out with and discussed, and then there was nothing. They need to have something pertaining to Legion that they can post every week. If it's a screenshot, if it's a tidbit, if it's a question, something pertaining to Legion should exist on the forums on a weekly basis, in my book.
Yeah, I mean, one really cool thing that I saw back in the day when they were developing the Super Smash Brothers for the Wii, actually, is they had SmashBros.com, and every week they would post something. It would be an item or a new character or explaining some system, like a move set or something like that. And it was actually really cool because I'd log in every week to see what the new update was, and that kind of kept the hype going,
Right.
And I think, hype aside, it also helps when you're presenting ideas and you can get active feedback from people who know the Dust game so well. I mean, Legion is obviously similar to Dust in many ways, and just getting out and saying, "Hey, we're trying this," and everyone goes, "You're an idiot." Well, then that's good feedback to have because you don't want to, waste resources on something that's not going in a good direction.
Right.
So I'd really like to see that, like you said. I mean, just for feeding the hounds, so to speak, that people are just starving for information, and it's painful to see them begging for it and they're getting nothing. It's really kind of a shame.
It's one of those things where, probably because I'm very used to how CCP works, it conceptually doesn't, I think you guys are right. There's probably a cultural thing with it, in terms of just how they communicate and how they work through things. The comparison that I make in terms of another game, I'm actively monitoring another game called Eternal Crusade. It's a 40K, MMO, third-person shooter, first-person shooter. Runs off the Pico servers. Basically, you can get about 1,000 players per match. Match being a rough word. But they watched. You can tell by how how they're developing the game that they actually watched for other sci-fi MMOs and how they sort of progressed, like PlanetSide, and you get some clear hints that they watched probably what happened with Dust and what didn't happen over developmental time. But the thing that they're doing incredibly well right now, and they're roughly in the same stage that Dust is, or Legion is, I think, in that they're clearly pre-alpha. They've got a working mock-up that they can do some basic play with. There's still a lot of gray boxes and untextured stuff, but every week, every Friday, they do a live stream, not recorded, live. They run this off Twitch, with the devs anywhere from 3 to 6 devs, and they'll show actual play footage, live play footage every week. They'll talk through mechanics, they'll talk through things that they're thinking about. And the other thing is they actually read questions on the air from people that post on the forums or on Twitter. And these Twitch and YouTubes that they put out every week, every Friday like clockwork, is they're about an hour to an hour and a half long. So that's that's the other thing that I look at when I compare how we're getting with Legion, because I'm incredibly sold on the idea behind Legion. I really am. I'm a huge fan of the New Eden IP. I thoroughly enjoy playing Eve. I thoroughly enjoy playing Dust, and I'm really looking forward to Legion. What I would really like is, some sort of reciprocity, though, from the people that'll eventually want my money. That would be the way I would probably describe it. Oh, hey, looks like we got a new guest in the room, Iron Wolf Saber. You might as well jump in and give us an
Iron Wolf
introduction,
isn't
please.
a guest anymore. Let's just he's a regular.
Well,
It's a difference.
I had to have a segue in there somewhere, man. And now he's apparently on radio silence.
Sorry, I was busy cooking lasagna for the whole family. As for what's the communication between CCP and about Legion is, you need to understand that CCP is not every company, but that does not excuse them that they should not strive to be like these great examples that we're seeing. I mean, Warframe manages to do a live stream every 2 weeks.
Yeah, and their live streams are awesome. They're showing off new stuff all the time. I always enjoy looking forward to that.
And there's been plenty of times in the Warframe live streams that they'll say something, they'll think about something, and it gets forgotten about, or they actually canceled it, and it slipped their minds to tell everybody about it. I mean, they do make mistakes on the live streams, but the thing is, the community is so well used to the ideas of getting canceled, rehashed, changing on a dime, that it's fairly expected, and no one rages over it.
Well, the thing is, CCP doesn't need to make promises. They just need to offer up something. People are just starting for any bit of information. They don't need to have a definite promise of this will be in the game or this is how we're going to do it. Just, hey, we're thinking about this. What do you guys think? Stuff like that's going to go a real long way in kind of quelling the unrest within the community.
And they need to understand, CCP does need to truly understand that people love work in progresses. They like to see the game start forming. They like to see the bones, the guts, the DNA that's going into it. That's a very interesting thing about a lot of the developer culture that's been happening lately with the rest of the industry. As Hans Jagerblitzen used to say, CCP used to capitalize on this, but now that everyone's on the train board, they're doing it better, faster, and much higher quality. CCP needs to up their game, definitely.
Well, and the thing is that when you show off stuff as a work in progress, people offer their feedback, and they feel like they were part of that development rather than just radio silence, then here's the finished product. Well, that doesn't feel like I was involved in that. I mean, even if they don't listen to my feedback, if I was able to give it in an open form and see it as it's being developed, that's a big deal for me. To think that I was part of seeing this develop and be a part of the actual finished product, opposed to nothing, and then here it is, hope you like it. It's not as meaningful to me as a player.
Well, I mean, if you look at it in terms of like a customer loyalty standpoint, which generally translates into profitability, or at least is clearly a factor of profitability, when you emotionally engage somebody about a product, they're far more likely to spend their resources on that product. I mean, consider this. That's exactly why Eve has succeeded for going on 11 years now. It would emotionally engage people. And the reality is, it's a nerds game. I mean, that it is what it is. And there's a certain strain of that DNA that runs through the people that want to play Dust. You get a lot of the same mentality, mostly because there are a lot of former or active Eve players that play Dust. But the guys that would play Legion, particularly if there was that sort of baked in and clear tie-in back into Eve, those are the people that are intensely interested in the below the surface part of the game and seeing how things develop, as you said, and understanding what's going on other than just the UI in front of them, which is something I find kind of interesting about the whole community that you see in Eve and to a large degree Dust for that matter. So, as a player, all I'm saying is there's a lot of people out there that or a lot of games out there that are probably fairly direct competitors with the market share that Dust wants. And a lot of the companies right now, and I think Iron Wolf said it right, they took cues from how CCP engaged the community and used the community as perhaps a data point over time, and they're clearly at the next stage or the next generation, version of how they communicate and interact with folks. Now, I think sometimes CCP does a great job, but it's really on the Eve side that they can do that, probably because they're much more comfortable with it. And that's the one thing, if there's a dev listening, or if Rouge ever gets a snippet as he's commuting to the office on a podcast, the one thing I would really want to transmit to him is that a lot of people believe in the idea behind Legion, and they've got a pretty loyal base of folks that can provide good feedback and frankly be great word of mouth and just engagement about the game on a consistent basis. And I think Pokey's right, it doesn't have to be a lot, but a consistent basis would go huge. That would be a big thing, and frankly it would be no different than how many of the other really innovative game design workshops are starting to work right now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking of is when I was, I think it was towards when I was first starting to play Eve, that I was looking at dev blogs, and one of the first dev blogs I remember seeing, Eve's side, was called Missiles Hate My Hamsters, and it was like a 4 or 5 page long blog with graphs and charts about the server performance effects of missiles compared to other types of ammunition, and it was exceptionally technical. It provided no information for anyone actually playing the game on how to play the game better or what was coming in the game anytime soon, but it was a very interesting article, and that sort of thing is something you don't see out of the Dust side at all. They won't. There doesn't seem to be a dev blog out unless there's something new to announce. In many cases.
I like to correct you on that. The closest we actually got to the net was our sound engine one.
That was awesome. I really like that read.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was good.
Okay.
Logic Loop did a really good one back in the day about map design too. So,
yeah. Actually, I think Sox 4 threw a couple out that were in, maybe perhaps not exactly in that category, but they were drifting towards it. Just kind of in the interest of time, guys, because I mean we could wax eloquent about like how much we enjoy CCP stuff and don't enjoy how much they don't talk to us. I would like to kind of move on because we do have some pretty cool stuff to talk about. If that's cool with you guys, I'd like to jump right into Hotfix Charlie and kind of clean up the discussion from last week, which is we sort of stopped before we talked about the changes to the assault suits and really how the medium frames are kind of utilizing the, I don't know how to describe it, I guess a standardized slot layout. It's really intriguing, and I'd really like to hear your guys' take on it and your general thoughts on how Hotfix Charlie is playing now that it's dropped.
I think it's interesting to see the assault class kind of come back into vogue. I'm noticing a lot of people are really enjoying, how they play, how hardy they are in the field. I mean, they've got so much HP in cases that, as a Logi, it almost feels, sometimes that you're repping as something as powerful as a heavy when you're supporting them from behind. So, I think some of the assault suits are pretty awesome, and I think a lot of people are really enjoying them. I'm hearing some complaints out there from the heavies ever since the CPU and PG changes went down. For my heavy suits, there wasn't really a big change, but then again, I'm a heavy that kind of stacks a lot of armor plates, and they're not that CPU and PG intensive mostly. But for some of the other heavies that were doing, that were putting some different kinds of mods in that were a little more CPU and PG intensive, they've had to dramatically alter their fits, especially like the Caldaris. I think they've suffered maybe as bad as anyone because, and this, Jason, as someone who runs a Caldari Logi, it's a similar issue in that the high slots, often have modules that are going to be far more CPU and PG intensive, and
very resource hungry.
Yeah, so the heavies on the Caldari side are facing those same limitations now, and a lot of them are complaining that perhaps their suit is useless.
Right. So I wanted to jump in on this one. So I have never put not one lick of SP into heavy suits other than to like I put in 3 levels of Cal Heavy just so I can get into commando suits, and I brought that up to advanced, right? So I had about 5 million SP that was just banked, and after Charlie dropped, I was looking to try to expand out, so I immediately protoed Cal Heavies, like Cal Sentinels.
I'm so sorry.
I did that, and then I dropped another, I don't know, like 2 mil into the HMG, so that one's pretty dialed out right now. And right now, I can fit pretty much everything I want on that thing. I can run a proto HMG. I can run like 3 extenders and an energizer, and all complex. And I can run a complex regulator, and I run like a toxin, BPO SMG, and like an advanced grenade. I'm relatively close on my fittings, but I'm still pretty pleased with that. I mean, if they had more CPU than what they have now, I'm kind of amazed. So I'm because I had heard that too, like that there was going to be a serious fitting problem with the Sentinels, and I think they're right if you don't have your core skills up, because I've got all my CPU and engineering to 5, and I'm a big believer in anything I can put SP into that makes my CPU and PG efficiency better, I do that. And I found that like having that thought process, or like, that sort of style of SP investment, I personally don't have really any issue fitting that thing. Now I'm still very new to heavies. Literally, this is like first week ever legitimately using heavies, other than like something that comes in a pack, or that kind of like a pre-made suit. So I'm enjoying it quite a bit, and it's pretty interesting working with a Cal Heavy. It also clearly makes me really wish that we had like a remote shield repper. Just throwing that out there, hint, hint. But I didn't see the same CPU. I expected I was going to be forced to run like a lot more standard and advanced stuff across the suit, and I haven't seen that yet.
It's a lot rougher than it was. I mean, I have high fitting skills and a Caldari heavy suit as well, and I definitely had to trim back my fit a fair bit, but it does work. But I do hear it's a lot squishier than other heavies are experiencing. So
yeah, but it hasn't always been that way?
I suppose.
I mean, the Caldari Heavy, you can't look at it the same concept as like an Amar Heavy. It's not meant to be a hardcore buffer tank. It's got to be more of a regen based. And admittedly, I haven't spec'd the Caldari Heavies. I've only done mock fits on protofits.com, but you can actually get some pretty cool stuff out of it. You just can't think of it as the same type of suit as like a Glenteer and Amar.
Yeah, my Amar has a crazy amount of armor now. I mean, I almost benefited where a lot of other heavies have taken a hit. It seems like my heavy might have actually gotten a little bit better. I mean, yeah, I had to drop my second damage mod, but other than that, like the increase in HP has been pretty surprising. So, but that just goes to show that like a lot of your low slot modules don't require the same CPU and PG as the high side. So I can imagine that the experience varies greatly depending on which kind of heavy you have.
Well, it's much easier to make the choice to put a plate on than it is to put an extender on in a lot of cases, because the plates are just so much better than the extenders.
Yeah, and the other things, it's interesting, that like the shield versus, armor balance stuff is I think discussed or / fought over in almost every patch or hotfix that affects, tanking styles. And, I'm actually generally pretty happy with happy is a strong word, I think, but I'm pretty okay with where it's at right now. It feels pretty decent. I mean, you noticeably have to play a very different style when you're shield tanking versus armor tanking. And a lot of people do forget, I'll tell you right now, regulators are important. After they beefed them up a little bit, they're pretty legit. The one interesting thing I think a lot of people forget is the penalty to recharge time when you stack extenders, I think is, you could arguably say, more significant than the penalty to movement speed that armor tankers experience with armor plates. That's purely a personal viewpoint on it, but I generally think it's in a pretty good place. And I'm actually having a lot of fun with the Cal Heavy. I just wanted to chime in on that real quick because I was really anticipating to have to make more choices in the suit, or like trade-off choices, which I actually think is a good thing. My personal opinion is I don't think any suit outside of perhaps standard, maybe advanced, but definitely at the upper tier at the proto level. I don't know that you should be able to run purely proto everything across the board in a suit. That just unless you have really really uber fitting skills in your character.
Charlie's been a wrecking my wallet this entire thing so far though, because I have to go back to the Roman Service Suit and learn how to fit it because so many changes. I mean, one thing I've noticed since the change in Charlie was that my Cal Sentinel is not like paper thin in terms of taking damage, so it's just been an entirely different experience and relearning everything again, just about.
I think the thing I'm most happy about is seeing a fairly even spread of different suit types. I'm seeing a lot more assaults, but there's not like an overwhelming majority of them. They feel pretty balanced. There's still quite a few heavies, quite a few scouts. Probably less lodges than I'd like to see. That might be telling, but overall, I think it's looking pretty good in terms of usage across the board.
Yeah, I'm really happy that they got the assaults back in the game because they were definitely missing. I think they add something to the dynamic of the battles, and it's good to have their presence. I think as a support player, I'm even like I mentioned before, I'm finding that I'm enjoying support play maybe a little more than I was before Charlie because that they're on the field and because they are now another target for me. For repping and, I'm scanning and there's people out there, with these Slayer suits that are, following up on my scans with more kills. And, I quite like it so far. My overall review on the, what they've done to the assaults is very positive.
Good deal. What do you guys think about the concept Rotati's now injecting with sort of standardized layouts per suit type, like weight class, if you will?
I think it's interesting. I mean, we kind of see the assaults already moving to have a similar slot layout to the Logis with few exceptions, which might change with the Logi pass. I mean, I'd also like to see the Commandos get a bit of a change, bring them to have a similar slot layout to the Sentinels. I think it's good for a lot of new player experience because they can go into a frame and they know what to expect. Their entire fitting philosophy isn't going to change based off of the role. They kind of have a fitting philosophy based around the frame rather than the role itself. And I think that's going to help a lot in the balance between, suits of the same frame, like the Commando, the Sentinel, and the Assault and Logi.
I'm open to being sold on the idea. My first impressions as someone who enjoyed the sidearm on the Amar Logi and who sees all the fitting issues associated with the Caldari Logi, it's kind of a hard thing for me to wrap my head around at this moment. But if they can, clearly clean up their proposal and figure out how to make those suits effective with those changes. I mean, that's especially with the Caldari because, I've mentioned it in previous shows before. I don't know how you're going to add an equipment slot, take away a low, and then expect the Caldari Logi to have a proper fitting based on those parameters. So, if you can figure out a way to do those things, then I'm all ears. But until then, I'm going to remain a bit skeptical on changes like that.
Well, I think the Amar Logi needs to keep its sidearm. I think that's something they shouldn't take away from the players. I think that's kind of a cool little twist on the whole thing. As for the Caldari, I think the whole slot layout and resource needs to kind of be overhauled, as a whole. It's rather than just, quick change, remove a low and add a thing here. I think it's too messed up at this point to just kind of make that quick fix. They need to really take a look at the numbers and see what kind of fits you can actually do and not just, do a switcheroo on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the good thing is not only has Rotati and Logibro proven that they're willing to adjust, module slot layout, but they're willing to adjust CPU, PGU, as referenced in Charlie. So I think, I'm very much in a kind of a wait and see mode to see what they want to talk about for Delta. The assumption I think everybody has is that Logis will be touched in Delta, even though I don't think that I've heard either one of those two explicitly discuss that. I think it's just a very clear assumption from the players right now that they're going to, because they've literally touched every other suit out there in some form or fashion other than the Logis right now.
Overall, what I'm thinking about what they're trying to do with the standardization of the slot layout is to create what Wizards of the Coast have called a Jedi curve. Basically, you're given a set amount of power and you're given the suit the abilities based on a score, so to say. and from there, then you can start doing your divergences. And by returning everything to a standard will allow them to understand how things are weighted, instead of just randomly making up things like it was done haphazardly when they were first introduced.
Yeah, that's something I've kind of been griping about for a long time. Is that some of the design choices early on were lacking in organization. And I think the concept of having, like you said, like an arbitrary value. I'll use the Amarology as an example. Like, is a sidearm worth an equipment slot? Choices like that where you can kind of have a standardized suit, and then you can do your divergence from there. In that way, it stays balanced as long as those ratios are maintained and balanced, at the base. So I'm really happy to see them kind of pushing for that. I wish it had happened a lot sooner, but it's happening eventually, and that's good to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fair. I really do like the idea of, like I said, the concept of the standardized layout per frame is pretty interesting, because then it really drives the discussion about role and racial bonuses, and the different things that you can work around that sort of baseline. And to be frank with you, I think from it just strikes me from like the developer standpoint, it's to a degree, not totally, but to a degree, it makes things a bit simpler to balance around, because it's a factor that you can homogenize a bit, and I'm okay with that. The one thing that I always caution people about, and I see this on the EVE side a little bit too, so this is sort of where my head's at on it, is be careful not to over standardize things or make things a little bit too vanilla, and with the best of intentions, by the way, usually to make things simpler. So that'd probably be the one thing I'd kind of offer on that. Since we've kind of already started talking a little bit about something we might like to see in Delta, and I think it's obviously it's no surprise that I think some of us are very interested in them touching the Logi suits in Delta to see if they can tweak that a bit. I'm curious, what other things that are you guys interested in pressing the the team on for Delta, or some of the other things that you've heard players pitching to you for about Delta? I know there's going to be a sidearm rebalance or sidearm discussion in Delta, but beyond that, I haven't heard too much specifically that they've mentioned on the forums yet.
I'd like to see some work done with the commandos. I feel the bonuses are a little. I like the concept. I think they're a little weird in some cases. Seeing people pick a Minmatar commando to use a swarm launcher, which is a Kaldari weapon, is a little off to me. So I'd like to kind of have them revisit that and take a look at it and make it a little more lore centric, I guess. So it makes more sense in that regard, and it kind of helps again make more of the suits relevant. I know some of the commandos are less favored than others because of their weapon choices. So I like to have them take a look at that, and again, standardized slot layout, maybe bring them more along the lines of the Sentinel in terms of slot layout might be beneficial as well.
No, I think that's pretty fair. If for me, in terms of the commandos, they're actually not in a bad place. I think it would be pretty cool though if they would branch out the like the AV options by race. If nothing else, if they did nothing else to them, by the way, for the record, I do like your idea about making them somewhat more on par with the Sentinels in terms of their module layout. But off the top of my head, I thought that the Galente and the Amar could share the bonus to the plasma cannon, Minmatar and the Caldari share the bonus to the swarm launcher, as a way of sort of broadening the utility or the AV pool across the commandos.
Yeah, and that makes sense in terms of lore as well, because Amar weapons are typically EM or thermal, and the plasma cannon's obviously thermal. I mean, it's a blaster, but it's still thermal damage. So I think that definitely works. And I think that the capability of having anti-personnel and AV at the same time on a commando is definitely one of the selling points of the suit. So giving that to the Amar in particular would be really good, since they're kind of lacking weapon choices at the moment.
I'd like to just, since we're talking about gathering, feedback for Delta, I just want to quickly plug Cross2's Logi thread that he has on the forums right now. Cross has sort of become my Logi brother from another mother, and he started a really good thread trying to get some feedback from the Logi/support community about what things can be done to improve the plight of the Logi. And if you're interested in voicing your opinion, putting your proposals out there, he's currently pretty active on that thread. I've sort of co-signed it. I'd like to be a little more active on it myself, and I'd certainly intend on being, but definitely go there. There's been some pretty interesting proposals on there. One that I saw that I'm kind of interested in is the idea of having efficacy bonuses for equipment for each level that you're skilled into the equipment. And clearly if you paired that with the racial bonuses, that might create a situation where some things are OP, but I think there is a feeling among some members of the Logi community that they would like to be at least a little bit better at every piece of equipment compared to non-Logis. So I think that would be one interesting possibility and how you could accommodate that request. But there are lots of different ideas floating around in that thread. So if you're interested in checking that out and contributing, definitely head over there. So just wanted to say that. Hello, Cross, if you're out there.
No, that is actually a pretty good thread, and you and Cross keep that thing on point pretty well. And what I've noticed generally in that one is that it's because it kind of addresses like a sub community or like a more of a niche community. That you tend to get a much higher like per capita of constructive feedback posts than you do in a lot of other threads. The Scout community can kind of be the same way. If you ever dip into some of their threads, if they don't kill you the first time you post, they get really into the mechanics. And I think you see the Logi community, which is frankly like guys that are really truly dedicated support players. And I've been one since I started between pure Logi and pure AV. I really enjoy that role. It's much to me. I like it. Kind of brings out the tactician in me a little bit more. But you definitely have a group of players that are really engaged in that right now in terms of providing some fairly constructive and on-point feedback about different things that you can do. So I do second that, SMB. Like that's a pretty good way to engage a couple of CPM members on some things that you might want to be able to push to CCP for Delta.
Absolutely. I think another thing, because this just came out with Charlie, we just got those 3 times LP rewards. It's 3 times larger than it was in the past. And then there's another thread out there that's pretty interesting. I don't know if everybody here has had a chance to look at it, but there was a person out there on the forums who was trying to come up with some, way to create sort of an exchange rate between ISK and LP, and what is the buying power essentially that you get from a faction warfare match based on the prices in the LP store. And, I've kind of looked at that a little bit myself. I've certainly not done as deep an analysis as that poster. And I wish I could remember that poster's name offhand. I do apologize. But the thing that I've noticed a little bit is that given some of the prices in the LP store, even with the increased LP payouts, the increased LP payouts are still not representing a significant. Well, it's 3 times more, but compared to your ISK payouts and pubs, it's still not producing the same buying power for items in the store that it really should. I think the idea that everyone in the community was sort of hoping for with these increased LP payouts is that being in faction warfare would allow you to get more for your compensation. And given some of the prices in the LP store for certain items, I mean, if you look at like some of the proto rifles and some of the other things, I mean, you could almost wipe out an entire faction warfare LP payout on, barely one piece of equipment still. And it really depends on what level you are too in your respective faction. But I think the end goal that we should have, and you got to kind of work backwards, with your design on this particular idea, is that you have to ask yourself, okay, we want people to play faction warfare. We clearly want LP payouts to give them more buying power and for that experience to be more forgiving overall. How much more buying power, maybe at the upper end of, once someone has sort of maxed out a particular faction, how much more buying power should they have in their compensation compared to someone in a pub match? And I would propose that, you should have 1.5 to 2 times as much buying power. I mean, if you could imagine the LP store and ISK prices, imagine if the LP store had all of the prices for its gear at 50% off compared to the regular marketplace. I mean, that would represent, double the buying power that you currently have with the regular market. So if you could make your LP prices represent that same sort of situation, I think that would be really helpful in terms of further driving activity of faction warfare. And of course, that would support this idea that our LP payouts are significantly better than ISK payouts, which I think given the prices is not currently really the case just yet.
Well, I think if you remember when the LP store first came out, even I believe there was 2 or 3 blue tag posts on it that were trying to highlight the point that that many of the prices in the LP store, or that the concept behind the LP store, really was designed to work in conjunction with some form of a player market, or at least player trading, where you could basically run different kinds of matches, and you could trade items, or you could, it was that really, really baseline economy level that they had to engage in, and it sounded like they structured the payments based around that. But obviously, I think when they posted it up, they knew that it was. That's one of those beefs that you have, is like, it sounds like in retrospect they knew that player market, or that player trading was never ever going to come, but they wanted to get the LP store in anyway. Which I do. I give them a certain amount of credit for wanting to put it in there, but that also tells me that, just like you said, they've got to figure out what is the kind of the break even that they need to generate in terms of buying power. Which, by the way, is actually a really good way to look at it, because it's about relative exchange, or at least about relative buying power. Off the top of my head, I think if I were like level 10 in Caldari, which I'm not, by the way, I'm nowhere close to that, but if I was level 10, one winning payout might get me enough LP to purchase one proto fit suit. But that's even deceptive, because you have to go across multiple LP stores to actually get the things that you would need to fit a suit, particularly like a Logi suit. You can't pure fleet it right out of the the LP store for your faction. This also goes back to the thing I've harped on in the forums a couple times, is what is the magic number for how many times you should be able to die or lose your vehicle in a match, be it faction warfare or pub, and break even with a winner payment? Like, what is that number? Because I'm that seems to me that one of the things that you need to kind of figure out is, like, are 5 deaths okay, then you break even? Are 10? Are 3? What is sort of the conceptual baseline that people are working off of? And then you can kind of use that as a factor when you figure out your payments. But back to the Hotfix Charlie thing, I broadly really like the fact that they've upped the LP payouts. I played a couple matches, faction warfare matches, noticeably better, really, really handy. But like you said, you're still a ways away from being able to, as Soraya puts it, make faction warfare a lifestyle or a career as a dust merc. So I mean, that's just my general thoughts on it.
Well, it's not just the payout, though. It's the fact that you can't necessarily buy everything you use in the LP store. The LP store is not complete, and that really needs to be a priority if they want to drive people to faction warfare. Because if people use a weapon or a suit that they can't buy with LP, they aren't going to care how much LP they get, because they can't buy the suit with it. So they have to go back to pubs to get the IS to buy the suit. So that I really want to stress that you need to really push to have that LP store fleshed out and completed to include every item in the game, because otherwise people just aren't going to do it, because half the stuff isn't in there yet.
No, very, very fair point. One of the things I've noticed, by the way, with Charlie, I've tried to use my swarms a little bit. I'm still very effective against tanks. Haven't really seen much difference in play, and for me, it probably is not changing a whole lot. I think there's been maybe one instance I could clearly contribute to needing one more volley of swarms, perhaps because of the damage reduction in proto to really put the screws to a vehicle. But broadly, I think those are working fine. And one huge positive, by the way, I'd be really remiss if I didn't tee this up for you guys. The turrets and the the installation turrets. Man, that's awesome. That is another thing to fight over in a match now. That is very legit.
Yeah, the turrets are awesome. I'm really enjoying them. I mean, I've kind of always said it's basically a tank that can't move, so it needs to be harder to kill than a tank. And I think they kind of really nailed it with this one in making turrets relevant in terms of their existence and placement and who controls them on the battlefield. I think that now that they're so powerful and difficult to kill, it actually makes them a real point of interest. And I really enjoy seeing turrets actually last throughout the match and have people fighting over them and actually using them for a purpose other than a Warpoint Pinata.
Yeah, I like it too. It's kind of funny though. I'm noticing it seems like some tanks are now taking out their frustrations on supply depots. So maybe the next logical step is to allow the turrets to shoot at tanks when they're shooting at supply depots. I don't know, but yeah, it's pretty cool to see it change the dynamic of the game a little bit. It's interesting to see that the tanks can no longer just farm them like they used to.
Now, there are some issues with turrets in the red line, perhaps exerting too much force into the battlefield based on their positioning because they can cover an objective too well, and they're so difficult to kill that they become a real problem for whoever has to go against that side. So I think that there might be some fine-tooth combing that needs to happen where they can go through and kind of look at the positioning on some of the installations and tweak them a bit so they aren't exerting too much influence on the battlefield. I know that Judge has expressed some displeasure with this, along with a lot of vehicle pilots who are getting gunned down at ridiculous ranges and spots because of the railgun.
Tanks, die.
Well, at the same time, like I said, there's some spots where, like in a domination match, you've got a turret that's got way too much coverage on the objective for one side but not the other. So I think we need to take a look at kind of where they're positioned. And a lot of people are complaining, remove the turrets in the red line. I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's good that the red line has some means of defense against vehicles and infantry pushing up on it, but we might need to take a look at the positioning and make sure that certain turrets aren't causing more influence than they really should.
I am glad they actually fixed the missile range on the missile turrets so that they're no longer infinite range, or at least several times bigger than the map.
I don't know, I thought 2,000 meters was reasonable. I mean, I should be able to hit things in space, right? That was sarcasm if you weren't sure. The missiles were ridiculous. I'm glad to see them get reduced to actually what they should be, so they aren't ridiculously overpowered now.
Well, it's not only that, the AI control range on them was pretty horrific too, because there'll be no one manning the missile turret in the red line, and here you are on your dropships, and the damn things keep constantly harassing you.
I still don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing.
So much vehicle hate in the room.
No, I just, I've heard this before, and, like I said, I've, like Judge, I've seen plenty of his videos, which I thoroughly enjoy, by the way, where if there's a singular focus of his hate, it would be redline railguns. And, I totally understand where some of his logic comes from, or where some of his thoughts are on it, or other people that bitch about redline turrets and this, that, and the other, which is really, I think it's more about bitching about it being the red line than it being a turret. But to me, everybody says, wow, we need PvE, that'll solve a lot of problems. Well, you kind of have that a little bit, just saying, an AI turret that can offend or defend is actually not a bad thing, and it is something environmentally that you must deal with. That's just, like I said, that's my opinion. I'm not a primary vehicle user, so perhaps I'm a bit skewed in that, but I certainly don't hate vehicles. I actually enjoy vehicles being powerful. I like them being something that can test a team very, very strenuously. But I really like being able to test that vehicle back, which it was just ultimately the problem that we're having. So from that angle, I really like the turret sticking around because I can actually jump behind a turret and not get smoked within 15 seconds of trying to man the gun. And you can actually have an effect on some of those vehicles. I think that is a good thing. I'm not a certainly not a hater on it. Let's see. I did want to transition a little bit to Delta just for a little bit in terms of other things we're thinking about in Delta. Are there anything that you guys have heard about that they are in fact going to look at other than the sidearms? Have they actually announced anything other than that?
Or I don't think we're allowed to talk any further until Snorri officially leads the way with it.
No, I got that. I meant like on the forums because they very clearly said that they're going to look at sidearms and Delta. I didn't know if there was anything else.
Sidearms and possibly look at the sniper rifle, as well as continue to look on things that happened to Charlie that didn't work out to plan.
Yeah. Speaking of sniper rifles, one of the things on Charlie that I've been collecting feedback on is the new scope, and I'm getting a largely negative feedback on it. There's a few people who really love it, and a lot of people who really hate it. And I think we were trying to find out. There was a suggestion that maybe that was correlated to whether or not people were DualShock 3 or keyboard and mouse player. I'm not sure that's the case though, based on the feedback I was getting. I think it's generally just hated, but I'm not sure.
You know, it just dawned on me. Like, I truly do not know how hard this would be to do, but I've played a lot of other games where you could actually tune the colors of the like your reticle. Like, I would just offer that.
That would be well with dust. That would be hard.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but man, just like not having a white dot that gets washed out, or like on a lot of the different reticles. Like, I would really like to have a different color. Like, like seriously, if all they have to do is just like turn a dial to change that shit a different color, do it. The best example I can give you of how that's done pretty well in the game is the submachine gun. Actually, when you flip up the aim down sights on it, and it's got that yellow, like almost holo sight on it. If you took a bright yellow or bright red or something that would not wash out in the background, and just applied that broadly across all reticles, like I said, don't know how hard it is. Strikes me if they can diddle with the sniper rifle shape, they can certainly like at least tweak the colors on these things. That would be a really nice small change that they could do to kind of help everybody out. So please continue. You're about to say how incredibly awesome my idea was.
Well, no, what I was going to say was one of the things I was hoping to possibly look at for the sniper reticle at least, was seeing if they could be convinced to perhaps have variant weapons, because that should be a hot fixable thing to have different weapons with a different reticle, something along those lines.
I think that'd be pretty legit. People have preferences. It'd be good to give them the option to pick one or the other. If it's feasible, I think it should be done, because there are pretty mixed and very polarized reviews in that I've been seeing. So, like you said, some people hate it, some people love it. So, it'd be good to have both.
I would like the charge reticle back, but I know that's not going to be possible anytime soon. The one where the charge indicator was near the center and you didn't need to look down in the corner.
I vastly preferred that as well. That was much nicer.
On the Forge gun as well, I hate the thing being in the corner. It's too hard to see what's going on while looking at the charge at the same time if you aren't using an assault.
Yeah, it's far too often I dry fire the Forge gun when I'm trying to AV, and it's like, it costs me like, I don't know how many seconds 6 to charge nowadays, but it's around 4 or 5. And it's just really heartbreaking to see that your target just get away because you dry shot.
Yeah, premature chargulation happens. I'm sure there's something that you can put in some SP into that.
The Forge gun operation. Now, back in the old days, it used to cause basically when you did shoot a little bit too early, it still fired, but the projectile would go out, but it did no damage.
Right. I don't know. I think I would prefer it just to not fire and hose me, other than like troll me. Let's see. I think that about it covers it for at least in terms of Delta. I mean, broadly in Delta, I think what we've talked about is touching the logis, which it sounds like the next sort of logical steps in terms of suit balance. Touching the commandos a little bit, maybe a little lighter hand on them. We know they're going to mess around with the sidearms a little bit. I want to follow up on that one in just a second. Some discussion about sort of where things were at with some of the things we tried in Charlie about the reticles. And again, I'm not joking. I was kind of only half joking there. I was like, that really would be cool if they would just change the colors of some of the damn reticles. That would be really kind of handy. Let's see. Other things that I've seen people kicking around, maybe continued tweaks to the faction warfare payout system, which again strikes me as something that you could kind of generally creep up. You could like very small increments up until you find if you think you're in the sweet spot or not.
I think they got to make that a science. I think, right? I mean, triple LP is kind of arbitrary. It's just like, oh, we're going to make it 3 times as much, but I think it's all relative to the price of the items, and until you can really create like a very logical exchange rate on that somehow, and I know it's going to be very difficult to do that. I don't know that we're ever going to find the sweet spot until we take that approach, because just upping the payouts without really looking at the whole picture, I just don't think that's going to get us where we want to be.
Well, two things just struck me when you said that. One, everybody agrees triple payout over what we had previously is very good.
Absolutely.
But clearly not enough. So that tells you how far out of whack the payout system probably was or is. And then part two, this strikes me as one of those areas that is really ripe for the CPM to kind of make its bones, so to speak, because of the amount of work that the players would put into this versus the handful of guys that are focused on Dust itself. And I think this is one of the ones where you could have, if it was structured correctly with the CPM and the community, like a really, really deep exchange engagement on the math problem of that, sort of the science and the culture of faction warfare, and how should it interact via payments. I think that's one of those areas that you guys are uniquely positioned, particularly where Dust is right now, in terms of having, again, a very, very small focused team on Dust. But this is where you can expand the capabilities of the guys working on the product. In your position as sort of the community gatherers of information, or the guys that are that focusing lens for information. So I'll just kind of offer that to you guys. It's like, this is something that you guys, I think, are uniquely suited to really engage and take the lead on in terms of helping out Rattati and Logibro. Because let's be real, everybody in the world, we can figure out how to mess around with weapons and stuff like that, or diddle with drop suits. You'll get some feedback on that one, but the payout thing, that's one of the ones that you could really get a lot of hay made with the player base.
But you also have to remember that when Fox 4 originally drafted the LP store, a lot of the suits didn't have all the slots that they did, so any math that he may have came up with back then is mostly invalid now. But it still would be a good, helpful guide for reference for moving forward on creating a way to make faction warfare an environment to live in.
I would take it a step farther, not only to live in, but to thrive in. I think that needs to be the goal, not just to have parity with the regular marketplace, but to give players compensation that exceeds what they would get in pubs, to the point where they're able to get more stuff by playing faction warfare. I think that needs to be a goal.
I definitely agree.
Otherwise, you're just trading ISK for LP, and it's really no different then. It needs to be more profitable.
And and with it being more profitable, it will lead players who can excel and succeed well in faction warfare to switch to faction warfare, which will both lighten up pubs and create a better gameplay experience in Fac War as well. As you'll see, a much stronger fight as people have more incentive to win in Fac War.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the relative level of benefit from a pub versus a faction warfare being like significantly different. I think I really think that's probably a place that that could be focused on. The interesting sort of philosophical discussion is what is the point of PC anymore? And at some point, should anybody mess with PC, or should here's the option is, should the community, the CPM, and Logibro and Rattati really work to optimize and maximize player interaction in faction warfare? So basically, you have PC that can go on, but it stays basically as is, which is very little benefit other than just saying you want a district. Or do you literally set it up where it's almost like a binary game, like a two-tiered game now, with a sort of a sideshow, PC being the sideshow, and previously it was pubs and PC with faction warfare being the sideshow. But it strikes me that we're kind of on the cusp of an interesting philosophy discussion of do we put the time and effort into really tweaking faction warfare to make faction warfare the preferred upper end part of the game, where that's where you want to play at versus PC?
I would rather focus on Fact War, which is something that benefits a larger percentage of the player base. I think that the big thing that had to happen to PC was we had to take out the amount of ISK that was harming the rest of the game. But I think that PC is, it's politics. It's right now to some degree its own reward to succeed in it. It's the merits that you can set up matches of your own against the corps that you want to is the incentive to go do it. And I don't know if there's a good way to fix that system properly with what we have to work with in Dust, and I would much rather make Fact War a compelling game mode.
Well, let me throw this at you. What if you almost went back to the DNS Black theory, and you let people run player-driven tournaments out of PC, which would be awesome if it was just purely player-driven. Just let them do whatever they want out of PC, but turn faction warfare
again, player-driven. If they get players that want to do it, then they can. There's nothing stopping them now.
Just a drive motion and their logistics.
Yeah, no, I think that would be the way to go. And here's an interesting sort of secondary benefit that could occur long term. If a lot of the effort in terms of community organizing and the shaping that the devs team could do in terms of faction warfare, if all that comes about, there, it would certainly strengthen the case that some of you guys in the CPM and in the community, folks in the community, are making about the desire and the need for the Legion and EveLink at launch.
Oh, certainly.
I think we're all pretty passionate about that, but whether or not that's feasible, remains to be seen. But I think we're all big fans of there being a connection between the two games, and the sooner that can happen, I think the better in most of our estimations.
Yeah. Now, and again, this is as we've basically come full circle to some of our initial discussions, this would be a great topic that you might like to hear somebody like Rouge or somebody who's really driving the vision behind Legion in terms of I don't think anybody has heard a single person connected with CCP think that it's a bad idea to have a link that I'm tracking, even on the Eve side. I think what you've heard is a lot of speculation about the level and the depth it should be, or where it should fall on the prioritization list. But again, this is a great example of where it would be kind of interesting to hear from the team, from somebody who's driving the Legion development. What is the vision? Because I know when you look at the articles like the actual media articles that float around occasionally with CCP Rouge as the interviewee, he clearly says, and in fact, one time I'm quite confident here that I'm not misquoting him, that he said basically he wanted people to play Eve via a first-person shooter, which is kind of interesting because that's what he said publicly in a couple areas. So it makes me want to hear where his vision is or what he's thinking.
And that kind of goes back to what we were saying before about just giving people, throwing them a bone, little bits of information is going to go a long way in keeping people happy and content with the progress of Legion and whatnot.
Everybody's starving for information, I think, and if we can just get something and maybe a regular schedule of little somethings, that would go a long way.
Yep, I got you, man. And it looks like we're hitting our marker, and this is actually a pretty fun discussion. We had a tighter group that we could kind of talk through some things with, and it's always fun when we have like a room full of folks, like 7 or 8 people in here. But I think occasionally having a smaller number of guys in the chat really helps us focus our discussion and tease out some points. So I had a really good time tonight, guys, and I think it's really, really good that we could keep it kind of a very focused discussion. What I'd like to do is kind of transition to shout-outs, and we'll start to bring this episode to a close. Does that sound okay, guys?
Sounds fine.
Good deal. Since you piped up, you're up first, Iron Wolf.
I'd like to give a shout-out to SVT for making me feel like a scrub today. I lost about 2 million against you guys in pubs.
Nicely done. Okay, Pokey?
Shout out to my corp, OSG Planetary Operations. You guys are great. Looking forward to playing some more in Dust and in other games. And shout out to Derry. He should hopefully be back next week to stream for us. So we'll be back on the air next week.
All right, cool. SMB.
I'd like to give a shout out to Molan Labe as always. Love you guys. Going to give a shout out to Ratati and Logi Bro. Been really enjoying the collaborative process with those guys, including all of the my fellow CPM members. And I want to give a special shout out to who I think is one of the community's sort of gems, who's just a fan's fan when it comes to Dust. And I'm pretty sure you're fairly familiar with him too, Jason. A fella by the name of Luther Mandrix.
Oh yeah,
who's been around and who's clearly very passionate about the game, and he's active on Twitter and other areas. So I just want to say, good on you, Luther, for being a fan and for caring about the game as much as you do. You represent the very best in this community. So thanks a lot, buddy.
Awesome. And Soraya.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to all the new corps who've recently joined us in Top Men, and they're really seeing an active stretch at going back into PC. There's been actually a lot of PC matches this week in my alliance, so it's been kind of cool.
All right, good deal. And my shout outs for the night, basically, I'm going to kind of cheese out here a little bit and say it's pretty much everybody in the Dust community and the Eve community, pretty much everybody that I've played with or interacted with, good and bad, based on a CCP-based game. I would not have met or interacted with any of you without those games. So, kind of a big shout to the community and a little bit to CCP for giving us the games that we occasionally love to hate, but often just love to play and interact with our bros on. So that's, like I said, a little bit of a cheesy one, but there it is. So one last thing, I will likely not be on the show for the next few weeks. I will be overseas doing a few things in my day job, but Pokey and Soraya will be leading the charge here, and I really appreciate the opportunity these two guys gave me to.
It's all going to heck.
No, I doubt that, but I really do appreciate the opportunity these guys gave me to kind of jump into podcasting with them. It's been a lot of fun. I've been on several of the Eve Side podcasts as well, a mix of them, not just Podside, but a few of the other ones, and had a lot of fun at it. And I really enjoy working with the community and working with folks that just want to make the game better. So I really appreciate it, guys. Like I said, hopefully it won't be too long, but sort of work calls, and I will, real life is out there. So this will probably be Jason signing off for a couple 3 weeks at the minimum, if not longer. But I really do appreciate the opportunity to get on with you guys every week. So with that, we're going to bring this episode of Biomassed to a close. And again, later tonight, we'll have this up on iTunes, and we'll have it up on our website. We'll launch out in the Twitterverse and up on the forums, when we get it posted up. As always, your feedback is very welcome, and frankly, we need it, because a lot of the topics that we bring up are things that we see, that are percolating throughout the forums or in game in our chats. And occasionally we're getting more people engaging us quite directly on things that they want to see in the game. And one of the interesting things, I'll leave it up to Pokey and Zell on, but I've had a couple of people ask me about adding a short lore segment to the podcast, and it might be not a bad idea. Maybe you guys want to experiment with it while I'm gone, but it's a good example of when you get some community feedback about.
You can do it. Iron
different
Wolf
things.
Can do that.
Yeah, there you go.
That would totally be Iron Wolf's thing.
I'm only level 3.
Okay. So with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and bring this episode of Biomass to a close, and we will see all of you in a match somewhere, some win, since I know we're all playing Dust a little bit, and hopefully I will catch you in a gate camp on Eve as well. All right, signing off. 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 All right, signing off.